It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. I recently had a student come to me struggling in a product owner class where she mentioned that she just didn't have the right guidelines that she needed to help the organization create a product backlog. And she asked me if there was like a set of rules. And I explained to her that part of Agile is to not try to have so many rules and hard line pieces where you say, hey, it has to be this way or it can't be at all. But one of the things that I did or I was able to promote was that I said, I probably could come up with a list of like 5 steps that you should take. And you don't want to miss these 5 steps. These 5 steps will help you create a really good product backlog. And she got all excited. And I explained to her that the steps required some pre work because, well, you needed to make sure that things were in order. So let's get to the 5 steps. So, step number 1 means that you have to decide when you're having a meeting and who's going to be involved. Now, when I say a meeting, I want this to be more of a POBAFATA BLI creation meeting or a product owner, business analyst, functional analyst, technical analyst, backlog item creation workshop, where you invite a handful of stakeholders and a POBAFATA. It can be facilitated by a scrum master, but it doesn't need to. And this is a good time for you to break it into a couple of different 1 hour brainstorming sessions. You don't want this to be a whole day meeting. You don't want this to be intense. You want this to be quick spurt. Let's brainstorm. Let's get our ideas out there, right? Next is step 2. Step 2 is another short session with the same invited group where you discuss, or I like to call it journey mapping or creating a storyboard. And this is where you discuss the actual functionality and say, okay, out of all these ideas, which ones are going to be within our functionality, which one's going to be outside of our functionality, which one's going to provide a lot of value, which one's going to take way too long, provide little value. So it's going to take your brainstorming session from maybe 100 or 200 ideas down to the ones that make the most sense, right? Of course, at the same time, you can work on your third rule, your third piece of advice that you should be doing here, and that's making sure that you don't have duplicate ideas or ideas that are, how shall I put it, duplication of effort in different areas, right? Because sometimes it's not the same exact idea, but sometimes, if we create this here, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can repurpose it over here, right? So I think it's a matter of identifying duplicate ideas and making sure there's not things that you can repurpose. Step 4 is to do what I call the top 30 or the top 15. And what this is an opportunity for us to either dot vote or use objective stack ranking or get the team to quickly do an assessment and identify what the top items are based on our 3 rungs, which is Moscow, which is consumer awareness, priority, which is strategic readiness, and of course, technological feasibility has to play in as well. And then finally, you have to do a release planning session of some kind. Now, I of course recommend rapid release planning, and this is where you're going to have the developers put their T-shirt size. Now, the interesting thing is one of the things that I promote that many people have been shocked when I tell them is that I recommend when a card is created that the POBAFATA put an initial estimate somewhere and log it into a system. Now, I don't want it to be public, but I do want it to exist. So that way later when I do this session and I have the team sizing items using T-shirt size or whatever they're going to use, this way we can compare the initial size that the product owner thought the scope was going to be to the size that the team thought it was going to be. So that way if it's the same or only one column of difference, I'm not going to worry too much about that. That's good enough. But if it's more than one column of difference, if it's a huge gap, then I want to make certain that we identify areas where we have to have discussion and time box 5 minutes of discussion on each item just for clarification so that we can get things figured out. From this point, it makes it easy for you to potentially queue things and forecast into future iterations. It allows you to identify gaps. It allows you to identify where dependencies exist. And it sets you up for more of a detailed story mapping workshop if necessary, or really it sets you up for backlog refinement so that you can eventually make it into sprint planning. So those 5 steps are going to help you. So just to review once more, step 1 is making sure you have the right people in the meeting and making sure you're calling a meeting for the right time frame. Step 2 is the brainstorm, where you're going to pull together ideas and get those things out there. Step 3 is where you're going to remove duplicates and make sure that you don't have a bunch of things that you're duplicating effort on. Step 4 is going to be to identify the top batch, and step 5 is to do rapid release planning. And if you do those 5 things, you are absolutely positively going to have a well defined, well refined, well ready to run product backlog. Many organizations have done this, so I can say with confidence that those are the top 5. So that's going to do it. I hope that this helped you, and I hope that you find this useful. As always, if you have a topic you'd like for us to cover, reach out to us. Learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.